Now, a few weeks ago, Formula 1 decided to put out a really cool kind of bracket looking and trying to decide who is the most influential person in Formula 1 history, and the fans were actually allowed to vote kind of, I think it was every few days, and this was a few weeks ago actually, to kind of judge and vote for who they thought was the most influential person in F1 history, and it was kind of separated into 4 categories. I think it was drivers, team bosses, game changers, and innovators. I thought this would actually be quite a cool idea for a video to kind of go through the bracket in terms of my view. I've got it just down there, so yeah, I'll show you guys on the screen my bracket, and then we kind of go through it. I'll explain my choices because I thought it was, yeah, just a really fun and cool idea. And at the end of the video, I'm also going to compare the bracket that Formula 1 produced in terms of who the fans voted for against my bracket as well, and just take a look at some of the similarities and differences. So yeah, it should be quite a fun video. And of course, guys, let me know your kind of the most influential person in F1 history in the comments below as well. Now, guys, don't forget, if you do enjoy the content on my channel, don't forget to drop a like, smash that subscribe button, and check out my social medias. Instagram and Twitter will be above. But let's get into it. So there is a lot of names actually to go through here. So in terms of the first round, who's going to go through, I'm not going to take too much time. I'm probably going to try and summarize my points as quickly as I can, and then get a little bit more in depth once we get to like the top 4, the top 2 and stuff like that, because there is a lot of names to go through here. And yeah, I don't want to make this video, 30-40 minutes long, although there is so many. I can already see so many legendary names here. It's going to be so difficult, no doubt. So first of all, we are going to jump into the drivers bracket and kind of try to whittle it down to the number 1 driver, in my opinion, who is the most influential. So yeah, wow, so many legendary names. Let's just start off straight away with at the top left. So Sir Jackie Stewart versus Max Verstappen. Now, there was a little bit of controversy, actually. I saw on Instagram, a lot of people were asking, why is Max on here? Now, for me, in terms of these two, it's pretty easy. It is Sir Jackie Stewart for what he's done in terms of the safety side. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But I totally respect, and this is where I kind of want to stand up for Max Verstappen. Just realize this guy, before he was even 20, I'm not even joking, in his teenage years, this guy was selling out grandstands, and now we are going to Zandvoort, of course, making a return to the calendar purely because of Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen's influence at such an early age cannot be underestimated. So yeah, I totally understand why Max is on here, but for me, it is Sir Jackie Stewart. Now, next up, we have Lewis Hamilton versus Juan Manuel Fangio. Now, this is a pretty easy one for me anyway. I feel like Lewis Hamilton wins this bracket. Now, don't get me wrong, of course, Fangio was absolutely a legend. He was the first big superstar in Formula 1. We think of these multiple-time world champions. He was that guy, a 5-time world champion, but this isn't about just achievement, it's about influence throughout Formula 1, and there's no doubt that Fangio had a lot of influence, but for me, Lewis Hamilton, I think, is, to be honest, quite comfortably ahead of Fangio in terms of influence. Again, this is nothing to do with achievements or winning races or titles. This is pure influence. I feel like, for me anyway, Lewis Hamilton is quite, edges out Fangio there. So next up, we have Michael Schumacher and Niki Lauda. Now, immediately my heart just says, Niki, but I feel like Michael Schumacher just edges Niki Lauda. I know this is so horrible to make this choice, but I feel like Michael Schumacher the reason why, now, first of all, Niki Lauda, of course, legend, what he did to come back from 1976, of course, the fire that the massive crash that he had at the Nürburgring, it just showed the sort of level of mental capability and the will to live and the will to keep fighting that a Formula 1 driver has, so certainly very influential in that category. But Michael Schumacher just edges it in terms of Michael Schumacher created the athlete, the Formula 1 athlete that we know today, the mentality of always winning and never backing down, and the physical aspect as well. He was the first one, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on, but yeah, he was the first one to kind of almost innovate the physical side of being a Formula 1 driver. So yeah, for me, Michael just edges it in front of Niki, but yeah, such a tough choice. And then lastly, we have Ayrton Senna versus Jack Brabham, a pretty easy one for me. I'm going to go with Ayrton Senna there. Obviously, Jack Brabham, again, a massive legend, 3-time world champion. A lot of people forget, actually, but I feel like Ayrton, the influence that he had in terms of the way he was driving the car in Brazil, around the world, what he made people feel when they saw him drive. So I feel like, for me, Ayrton Senna quite comfortably edges out Jack Brabham on that one. So now we have the top 4, and we have Sir Jackie Stewart, Lewis Hamilton, Michael Schumacher, and Ayrton Senna. So wow, so what Jackie Stewart did from the safety side for Formula 1, he was the guy that stood up and improved safety in the 70s. When he started in Formula 1, Sir Jackie, it was actually normal to see 4 or 5 drivers die a year, which is just nuts. So for him to stand up against a lot of people, by the way, a lot of people thought he was a wimp. So yeah, that took a lot of guts, and what he did to improve safety, I mean, it saved so many drivers' lives later on in Formula 1 as well. So massive influence there. Lewis Hamilton, what he's done for the commercial side of Formula 1 and to change the image of what it is to be a Formula 1 driver. I mean, like, in terms of other sports, like my mum doesn't watch football, but she knows who Ronaldo and Messi are. My mum doesn't watch basketball, but she knows who LeBron James is. My mum, doesn't watch Formula One, but she knows who Lewis Hamilton is. And then what he's done outside of Formula One, I think a lot of people forget and I don't think a lot of people realize just how much of an influence Lewis Hamilton is. And in terms of spreading the image of Formula One and making it more widespread, of course, also the first Formula One black driver as well. That's a massive part, of course, of his heritage in terms of like what he means to Formula One. So he's a big influence as well. Wow, this is really difficult. I'm gonna need a second on this one, to be honest, guys. Hang on a minute. Right, so oh my god, I actually had to like pause the camera for like 5 minutes. I needed to really think this one through. I'm gonna go with Lewis Hamilton but yeah, oh my god, it's so difficult to decide, but I'm just gonna go with Lewis Hamilton in terms of the influence that he's had outside of Formula One. But yeah, Jackie Stewart, absolutely love you, man. What a legend. Next up, we have Michael Schumacher and Ayrton Senna. Now, for me, I am just gonna go with Ayrton Senna. I feel like, again, Michael is a massive importance in terms of the physical side. He kind of revolutionized what it meant to be an athlete in Formula One, and of course that winning mentality and all the success he had as well. But in terms of influence, Ayrton Senna was one of the very kind of few drivers that made Formula One an art form in terms of the way he drove and the influence that he had in only 10 years of being in Formula One. So for me, I'm going to go with Ayrton Senna above Michael Schumacher to go up against Lewis Hamilton. So yeah, Lewis Hamilton or Ayrton Senna. Now again, wow, what a difficult choice. I mean, all of these are difficult choices, of course. From the Lewis Hamilton side, again, it's what he's done outside of Formula One with Tommy Hilfiger, kind of breaking the mold of what we think a traditional Formula One driver is. They go to the track, they race, they go home, we never hear from them again. Maybe they do some promotional stuff. Lewis Hamilton broke that mold. The first ever black Formula One driver as well. What he did to break that barrier as well. Massive influence to the community. Of course, has inspired many people, and also the family that he comes from. Of course, he is the story when it comes to going from nothing to something. Now a 6-time world champion, potentially could be 7. So all of the stuff, it's very difficult for people to understand just how much influence Lewis Hamilton has outside of Formula One. All of my friends know who Lewis is. They've never seen a single Formula One race. That's how much influence he has. But Ayrton Senna, he also, of course, for what he did to Brazil, he is almost the kind of Brazilian driver. He is almost the Formula One driver when we think of passion, when we think of course, achieving loads of success and driving as well, because he was back in the day when you needed to be really physical to drive. And the way he drove that McLaren, especially the MP44 in the Dayglow red, I mean, it's just legendary to see those pictures. So yeah, who is my most influential Formula One driver in history? To me, a lot of people are going to hate this, but I'm going to go with Lewis Hamilton for what he's done for the sport outside of Formula One, and I feel like he's really underrated in that aspect. I don't think people actually realize just how much he's spread the image. He's broke the mold of what we expect a Formula One driver to be. So for me, the most influential driver who's going to go through to the final 4 is Lewis Hamilton. So now we have the F1 team bosses, and yeah, again, some really amazing names here. I mean, wow. Right, let's just start off straight away. So Enzo Ferrari versus Flavio Briatore. I feel like that's a pretty easy one for me. I'm going to go with Enzo Ferrari. Flavio, though, massive respect to him. What he did with Benetton is so underrated. The way he, of course, brought in Michael Schumacher and gave Michael Schumacher the start to his career, obviously, after Jordan. So yeah, massive respect, but I think Enzo Ferrari just edges it there. Colin Chapman versus Sir Frank Williams. Oh my god. So Colin Chapman is so underrated, by the way, in terms of what he did. I'm going to go with Sir Frank, but honestly, if someone went with Colin Chapman, I totally wouldn't understand. To understand how influential Colin Chapman was it's interesting that they put him in the team boss and not like an innovator, but I totally understand. Of course, he was a team boss. He had so much success and had some seriously legendary drivers drive for him, and just is such a legend in Formula One. And to understand his influence, what you've got to realize is that the Formula One, these brand new rule changes with the ground effect, of course, that Liberty Media are pinning their hopes on to improve the racing and improve the show in Formula One, it was pioneered by this guy and his team, of course, of aerodynamicists back in like 1978 with the Lotus ground effect cars. So all the work he did then and all the success he had at that time is still being influenced to the Formula One that we are going to see in the future right now. That's the sort of influence that this guy had. But massive respect to Colin Chapman. I'm just going to go with Sir Frank Williams in terms of he is the team boss in Formula One because he was right there, all the success he had, and he is even still now a very prominent member, of course, as part of Williams right now, even though he doesn't run it. But yeah, I think Sir Frank Williams just edges it for Colin Chapman, but both of these guys, absolute legends. Now, next up, we have Ron Dennis and Christian Horner. A very easy choice for me. It has to be Ron Dennis. I think a lot of people forget just how influential Ron Dennis was, but yeah, Ron Dennis for me, in terms of what he did with all of his drivers, and that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit later on. Next up, we have Jean Todt and Toto Wolff. Now, again, both incredible team bosses. The funny thing is, Toto Wolff hasn't even been in Formula One for a decade. That's how influential this guy is. But for me, it has to be Jean Todt to bring Ferrari back. And, you know, what he did in collaboration with Michael Schumacher, Rory Byrne, Ross Brawn, we're going to talk about those a little bit later on. What he did with all of those and leading the entire team, he brought Ferrari back to success, and he is a massive part of that. So for me, Jean Todt edges out Toto Wolff in that category. So then that leaves us with the final four of Sir Frank Williams versus Enzo Ferrari, and then Ron Dennis versus Jean Todt. Now, Enzo Ferrari versus Sir Frank Williams. Now, straight away, I'm going to go with Sir Frank Williams. Now, I totally understand why someone would say that Enzo Ferrari might have to go above, but what you do have to remember, and of course, Enzo Ferrari was the guy that started the Formula One team. Ferrari is the Formula One team. You know, F1 is Ferrari, Ferrari is F1. There's no doubt about it, but you've got to also remember that there was a lot of individuals that helped Enzo build Ferrari to where it is today. When he was actually still running the team, it took Luca di Montezemolo to come in as the team principal to kind of sort everything out, because Ferrari were in a bit of a mess at the time in those kind of late 60s, early 70s, and it took Luca di Montezemolo to kind of break, I think it was almost like a 10-year period of Ferrari not winning anything. So there's no doubt that Enzo's had a massive influence, but there was a lot of people on top of that needed to improve Ferrari to what we think it is today. So to me, Sir Frank Williams, the success he had over the years of starting his own Formula One team and having that constant success and being the incredible team and having these legendary drivers, I think Sir Frank Williams just edges out Enzo Ferrari, but I would totally understand why someone would go with Enzo on that one. Now, next up, we have Ron Dennis and Jean Todt, and to me, this is easily Ron Dennis. For me, Ron Dennis edges out Jean Todt, and I'll tell you why. Because Ron Dennis, number one, Jean Todt, we think about Jean Todt, of course, as the FIA president now and all of the success they had at Ferrari, but do not forget that Ron Dennis, what he did to bring McLaren back from a relatively unsuccessful period at the time, it was a little bit of a dip for McLaren, what he did to bring them back, get Ayrton Senna to the team, get Alain Prost, that incredible partnership, the success that they had there, then the success that he had with Mika Hakkinen a decade later, and then bringing Lewis Hamilton into the sport and having success another decade later. This guy is so underrated, and for me, it has to be Ron Dennis for the longevity of success that he has had. So yeah, for me, it is Ron Dennis. And in terms of the showdown for the two, for the most influential team boss, it does come down to Sir Frank Williams or Ron Dennis. You can give it to absolutely any of those guys. Oh, this is another very difficult decision, Sir Frank or Ron Dennis. I'm going to go with Sir Frank Williams. I feel like when I think of the Formula One team boss, the most influential throughout the years in terms of just the guy that has been the guy to look up to, and Eddie Jordan actually said something very similar, it goes to Sir Frank Williams for me. Massive respect to Ron Dennis. I'm a big fan of him, but I feel like Sir Frank Williams, with what he did to start his own team from the ground up to build it to where it is today, and yes, it is very sad that Williams are not where they should be, and I'm sure that it hurts Sir Frank a lot, but to me, yeah, I think Sir Frank Williams, in my opinion, is the most influential team boss in Formula One history in terms of the way he started Williams, the success that he had, the legendary drivers, the fact that he was one of the guys that broke kind of Ferrari and broke a little bit of their kind of success at the time. So yeah, I think for me, Sir Frank Williams is the most influential team boss in F1 history. So next up we have the game changers in Formula One, starting off with Bernie Ecclestone versus Hermann Tilke. Very easy one, probably easiest one so far has to be Bernie Ecclestone. I don't think we'd even know about Hermann Tilke if it was not for Bernie. So yeah, Bernie goes to the next part. Now next up, Dietrich Mateschitz versus Ross Brawn. It has to be Ross Brawn for me, in my opinion. The longevity of Ross Brawn, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. The fact that he was, of course, a part of the technical side, having success with Bennett and Ferrari, and now he is actually running the sport. That is absolutely amazing. I'm a big fan of Ross Brawn, and I always trust that he's going to do a good job with Liberty Media, because Ross Brawn knows exactly what he's talking about, and yeah, I'm a big fan. So for me, he just goes through. But in terms of Dietrich Mateschitz, I think his influence is most seen in the fun environment that he created for a Formula One team to have. You know, back in the day, it was like every single team was so uptight, every single team was so corporate. Red Bull broke the mold with Didi coming in and providing the financial support to create his own Formula One team and win those 4 world titles and have all that success, and at the same time be a fun Formula One team doing these crazy stuff like doing donuts at the top of buildings with David Coulthard. No team had ever done that before, but now we see even Mercedes having some more fun. They're much more laid back, and it's all because Didi created such a fun team in Red Bull. But for me, it has to be Ross Brawn because of the longevity and because of what he could also potentially do in the future and what he's done so far. But yeah, we'll talk about Ross Brawn a little bit later on. Next up, we have Max Mosley versus Murray Walker. For me, this is Murray Walker quite easily. Max Mosley has done a lot of good for Formula One, but there's also been a lot of negative headlines that he's also caused as well, which I'm not a fan of. And there's a lot of stuff that he did with the FIA and with Ferrari, the whole Ferrari international assistance. Yeah, Max Mosley, obviously, massively influential, there's no doubt, but I'm going to go with Murray Walker on this one for the incredible moments that he's created, the memories. He was the commentator. When we think of Formula One commentators from the 80s and 90s, we think of Murray Walker. So yeah, he goes through. Now, next up, we have Sid Watkins versus Helmut Marko. Now here, I'm going to go with Sid Watkins in terms of what he did for the safety side. I feel like he had such a massive impact both on and off the track. But also Helmut Marko, we cannot underestimate what Helmut Marko did, and the whole Red Bull project was almost innovate the young driver programs that every single team has today. He was the first one with Red Bull to promote a young driver and have that success with Sebastian Vettel winning those 4 world titles on the bounce. And now in 2020, every single team has a young driver program. Mercedes have a young driver program, Ferrari, Renault, all of them. And it's all down to the incredible pioneering work that Helmut Marko did. But as I said, for me, Sid Watkins will just edge Helmut Marko in that category. So the 4 that leaves us with is Bernie Ecclestone versus Ross Brawn. Wow, what a showdown that is. And then Murray Walker versus Sid Watkins. Now, in terms of the Murray Walker and Sid Watkins, I'm going to go with Sid Watkins. I feel like that's a pretty easy one. The influence that this man had, again, in terms of safety, is absolutely massive. He was right there in 1994, and he saw it happen for himself when Rubens Barrichello, of course, had that horrible crash at the start of the weekend. And then Roland Ratzenberger died during qualifying. He was there with him right there. And then, of course, Ayrton Senna the next day dying as well. And he saw from that point of view that safety needed to be improved. He made it mandatory to have, these kind of medical cars, at certain points of the track to make it so it's less than 30 seconds between a crash and a medical car arriving. He did so much to improve the sport and so much to improve the safety of drivers. It could not go underestimated. And he was such a great character as well. He used to wear this really tatty, really horrible old hat with the old FIA logo. And do you know why he did that? Because Bernie Ecclestone absolutely hated it. And yeah, Sid Watkins always used to love basically annoying Bernie. So he used to wear that horrible old FIA hat with the 90s logo in the modern days. So yeah, he's also a bit of a funny guy. Passed away, as I said, in 2012, but his influence cannot be underestimated. So obviously that leaves us with Bernie Ecclestone versus Ross Brawn. What a showdown. These two people alone, the influence that they've had on Formula One is ridiculous. And I'm going to go with Bernie Ecclestone on this one. Now, Ross Brawn, by the end of his career, he is going to be above Bernie in terms of influence that they had in Formula One, because what Ross Brawn has done throughout his entire career with Benetton, with Ferrari, with Mercedes, starting Mercedes up into the monster that they are today and getting the finance from, of course, Daimler at the time, and then the influence that he has now because he's running Formula One along with Liberty Media. I think once he's done... once he's retired, he's going to be above Bernie Ecclestone. But Bernie, for me, in terms of what he's done over his career, is just crazy. So yeah, to me, it is a Bernie Ecclestone above Ross Brawn. So then that leaves us with Bernie Ecclestone versus Sid Watkins. And I'm going to go with Bernie as the most influential game changer in Formula One, just above Sid Watkins to progress through to the next round. So now we get to the innovators part of the bracket, and I must admit, my knowledge of the engineering and the innovation side of Formula One is not the biggest in the world, but I do know quite a bit about some of these people. So let's start off straight away with Adrian Newey versus Mauro Forghieri, and this is a pretty easy one for me. It's got to be Adrian Newey in terms of what he's done for so many years. I think, he definitely quite easily gets that one there. Patrick Head versus John Cooper, and I feel like this one, John Cooper for me, I think just takes it purely because, of course, the Cooper cars were the first ones ever to have a rear mounted engine, and that of course is carried over all the way till the modern day. You won't see a front engine Formula One car, and all of the success that they had as well with that package and the way it innovated the cars of Formula One at the time. Next up we have Gordon Murray versus Cosworth. Now it says M. Costin and K. Duckworth. Now this is one that I don't have as much knowledge about, I will admit, so I'm not sure quite what it means by Cosworth in terms of maybe the designers or maybe the Cosworth engines. I'm going to take it to mean in terms of the Cosworth engines, and that's why I will give the edge to Cosworth, because I think that's what it means. The Cosworth engines had so much success. I think, though, people don't realize. Go and do some research, kind of looking at the past winners and which of the cars use Cosworth engines. The Cosworth engine won so many championships, and of course was even used up until, of course, the start of this decade with some of the backmarker teams which needed engines. So yeah, I think I'm going to go with Cosworth on that one. And then we have John Bernard and Andy Cowell. Now Andy Cowell is behind some of the legendary Mercedes cars of this era that have had so much success, but I'm going to go with John Bernard in terms terms of what he did for both, of course, McLaren, and then I think he did a bit of Ferrari as well. So yeah, John Bernard just takes it for me there. And then that leaves us with Adrian Newey versus John Cooper, and then Cosworth versus John Bernard. In terms of Adrian Newey versus John Cooper, I'm going to go with Adrian again from the success that he had at Williams, McLaren, Red Bull. I mean, this guy is such a legendary designer. He has been behind some of the best cars in Formula One history, and even now he's having success right now. He is still the lead designer of cars winning races right now that are going to be challenging for championships, hopefully with Max Verstappen in the future. So yeah, I feel Adrian Newey takes it for me over there. And in terms of Cosworth versus John Bernard, I'm going to go with Cosworth on that one. But when it comes to the overall innovator in Formula One, I still feel like Adrian Newey, he's going to be the guy that wins this bracket from my point of view in terms of what he's done over and the longevity that he's had in Formula One, and the fact that he's not even done yet. He is still going to have success in the future. I'm going to go Adrian Newey as the most influential innovator in Formula One history. So that rounds off my bracket in terms of which one of these people individually is the most influential within their bracket. But now, who is the most influential person, in my opinion, in Formula One history? Now, I kind of have my mind made up. In terms of Lewis Hamilton and Sir Frank Williams, Sir Frank Williams will edge out Lewis Hamilton for me there. And in terms of Bernie Ecclestone versus Adrian Newey, it will be Bernie who will be going to the final up against Sir Frank Williams. So yeah, my two most influential people in Formula One history is Sir Frank Williams and Bernie Ecclestone. And as far as who, for me, in my opinion, is the most influential person in F1 history, and to be honest, I knew exactly who my most influential person in F1 history was going to be before I even saw this table. Before this table even was kind of created by Formula One, I knew exactly who my most influential person in F1 is, and that is Bernie Ecclestone. Now, don't get me wrong, Bernie is not an angel. He has his demons, but here's the thing, except from Fangio, who was a little bit before Bernie's kind of era, none of these people would have been as influential, as successful, and none of these people would have been as big in terms of how well we know them today if it had not been for Bernie Ecclestone giving them the platform that he created Formula One into. When you think about what Formula One was before Bernie Ecclestone kind of took over and what he created it, Bernie Ecclestone took the sport that was, you know, incredible and had fantastic drivers and fantastic stories, and he was the one that put it on the TV screens to millions around the world. He was the one that went out and did the business and did all of the deals to take Formula One to places that it had never been before, to the Middle East, to China, to parts of Asia that Formula One had never been to before, and to America, and to all of these places. And it was Bernie Ecclestone that also put it onto the screens for more and more people to watch it every single year. He did all those TV deals, and he created Formula One what it is today. Even except from all of the business stuff that he did, he was also the guy that actually was very influential in basically returning Ferrari to their form, bringing Ferrari back up, because when Ferrari is winning, Formula One is winning. In terms of, especially from the financial side, he made a lot of money during the Michael Schumacher era, and Bernie Ecclestone was so influential in combining the Jean Todt, Rory Byrne, Michael Schumacher, and Ross Brawn, all of them together to get them to Ferrari and to get Ferrari succeeding and making him and Formula One money, because when Ferrari is up, so is Formula One. So Bernie's influence throughout Formula One is almost ridiculous to kind of comprehend. You know, as much as I was a fan of him during his time, and although he did do a lot of things wrong, I was kind of happy to see him, you know, kind of let go of Formula One in 2016 and give it over to Liberty Media, but that does not take away anything from the influence that he's had on Formula One. And to me, yeah, Bernie Ecclestone is the most influential person in Formula One history. So I said at the start of the video that I'm also going to compare it to the list that was made by Formula One in terms of the fan voting. Now, I'm not going to go too in depth with it because this video is long enough as it is. But yeah, in terms of who the fans voted, the most influential driver of all time, Michael Schumacher, that's totally understandable. I mean, for me, Jackie Stewart, Lewis Hamilton, Michael Schumacher, and Ayrton Senna, that's the four drivers. You know, you can pick any of those and I'll totally be happy with it. They've gone with Enzo Ferrari as the most influential team boss. I understand why people would go for Enzo Ferrari because we think of Ferrari now, but there was a lot of individuals that needed to make Ferrari what it was today, and it wasn't just Enzo. But yeah, I totally understand why someone would go with Enzo Ferrari. In terms of the game changers, we both went with Bernie Ecclestone, rightly so. And then in terms of the innovators, they went with Gordon Murray, I went with Adrian Newey. And then finally, of course, for me, it came down to Sir Frank Williams and Bernie Ecclestone, and for them, it came down to Michael Schumacher and Bernie Ecclestone. Now, of course, I said for me, it has to be Bernie, but the fans fans voted Michael Schumacher as the most influential person in Formula One history. Now, that's a very interesting choice for me. Again, I kind of disagree with that because Michael Schumacher would never have had the success at Ferrari that he did had it not have been for Bernie Ecclestone bringing Jean Todt there, bringing Rory Byrne and Ross Brawn. So yeah, I mean, again, it's fair enough, that's what the crowd decided, but for me, it has to be Bernie. So yeah, for either way, Michael Schumacher and Bernie Ecclestone, two pretty influential people when it comes to Formula One. So, well, there you go, guys. That is my kind of bracket completed in terms of who I think is the most influential person in F1 history. Now, in the comments below, I want you guys to name 5 people, 4 from each of the bracket in terms of who's the most influential driver, team boss, game changer, innovator, and then your one kind of winner. Who is the most influential person in F1 history according to you guys? So yeah, anyway, guys, hope you did enjoy this video, and if you did, don't forget to drop a like, smash that subscribe button, and check out my social medias. Instagram and Twitter will be above, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.